Taking control of our health, information that empowers. Our next session, we will have Dr. Patrick O.G., a dedicated healthcare consultant and community activist who is the chief executive hope dealer for I Advocate, a nonprofit that promotes health and wellness in underserved communities. Despite facing personal health challenges, including battling stage 3B end-stage kidney disease, he has continued to inspire and is a testament to the power of perseverance and the impact of unwavering advocacy. We also have Sandy Powell, who is a community engagement research advocate and a graduate of the inaugural class of the 2022 Patient Professors Academy at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacology. Sandy collaborated on research projects with the University of Maryland, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service, and Johns Hopkins University. Next up is Yejide Obisesan, Administrative Director of Georgetown Howard University Center for Clinical and Translational Science. In this role, she not only oversees the fiscal and administrative dimensions of the center, but also provides needed research startup guidance to new investigators and strategic guidance to leadership on HU growing clinical trials enterprise. Our moderator coming back to join us is Hope Ventricelli. She again is the Senior Manager for Community Events and Programs at SysScript. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our next panelists. And apologies for any mispronunciations, ladies and gentlemen. Is it the base? Or is it on the side? Everybody else's mics hot? Everybody good?
I think so.
Everybody say hello.
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 All right, Hop, there we go. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As mentioned, my name is Hope Ventricelli, the Senior Manager of Programs at SysScript, which is the Center for Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation. We have a number of great panelists with us today. Before we jump into our discussion about clinical research, I do want to show a quick video, which is on our next slide, just to show perspective of what the world might look like without clinical research.
Are you open?
Yes, we are. Welcome to the MT Pharmacy. There's nothing on the shelves because we wanted to show what modern medicine would be like without clinical trials. Clinical trials are medical research studies involving patients. They can help discover new medicines or get improved versions of existing medicines. They help us find out if a treatment can work in patients. We'd like to fill these shelves a bit like how clinical trials fill the shelves in a regular pharmacy.
I picked cancer for my box because my mother was a victim of cancer. She died of the year 2008. I was the age of 9 years old.
I've actually never thought about the fact that without clinical trials, we wouldn't have any of the medicines that we take every single day.
And without further ado, we're just going to jump into some quick introductions. If we go to the next slide, and we can just start with Miss Sandy. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about why you're here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am happy to be here. My name is Sandy Powell. I am a graduate of the Patient Professors Academy as a part of the School of Pharmacology at the University of Maryland. And that program opened my eyes to not only clinical research, the atrocities that we've experienced from the past, and I am excited to be here. I've jumped in headlong, had a lot of great opportunities, and hope that maybe I can impart a little bit of information today.
Over to you, Patrick.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick G. I'm the founder and chief executive hope dealer of iAdvocate, which is a faith-based health and wellness organization where we focus on underserved, underrepresented, and disenfranchised communities of color. I'm currently living with diabetic kidney disease and work with a number of organizations, and just like Sandy, I graduated from the Patients Professor Academy in 2023, so just happy to be here today.
And over to you, Yejide.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yejide Obisesan, and I'm joining you from Howard University in partnership with the Georgetown Howard University Center for Clinical and Translational Science. In my role as administrative director, I manage the center on the Howard side. I work and liaise with investigators to help them get studies as well as clinical trials up and running. And I also manage our clinical research unit where we actually bring in participants to do the procedures of clinical trials. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Do a round of applause for our speakers. All right, so I'm going to start with Patrick. As somebody who has had a diagnosis and has been a part of clinical trials as both an advocate and a participant, can you tell us about your experience of being involved in a trial as a participant?
One experience really comes to mind. It was when I did dialysis before I received my kidney transplant. And as I walked into the dialysis facility, I noticed that there was a clinical trial, probably at the start of telehealth, where they was going to give each patient an electronic scale, an electronic blood pressure cup, and a webcam to put on your computer. The purpose of this, again, was, our weights and our blood pressure would automatically be sent to the patient portal, and we would utilize the webcam to do our doctor days. Instead of having to go into the clinic to meet with the doctor face-to-face, you can do it at home in whatever room you're in. I signed up for it, and then one day I was called into the facility administrator's office, where she told me that I was rejected from the study. And when I asked why, she made this exact statement: he who owns the data owns the patient. And Patrick, you can't be in the trial because we can't get any money from your medical data. Now, that's not indicative of all trials, and I just want you to hear that. But that was very devastating to hear, since that was the very first time that I was able or wanted to participate in a clinical trial, because my friends and peers had participated in a clinical trial. But since then, I've been able to work on both sides of clinical trials, working with the IRB as well as being in other types of clinical trials where, they fared a whole lot better and the outcomes was much more productive.
That's great. Yejide, can you talk a little bit further about why somebody might not be selected for a trial, as your experience on the more professional side?
So when an investigator is conducting a clinical trial, these are protocols that have been invested in, developed by a certain sponsor. And the sponsor is looking towards a particular round of aims. And in those aims, they're looking for a certain type of participant to test whatever treatment it is that they're looking at. So for that, there have to be inclusion criteria. So inclusion meaning you can participate, this is who we want. And then there are exclusion criteria, meaning if you have these certain stats, we can't have you participate. And usually the exclusion criteria is for the safety of the patient. And it's also for the efficacy of the study, the success of the study. So, you know, you could have a study in which they're looking for patients with certain markers for kidney disease, and they want them to be at a certain want them to be at a certain spot in terms of the progression of their kidney disease, because the treatment that they're looking at treats this aspect or someone at this point of kidney disease. So they wouldn't be able to include someone who's further along because they already done testing to say this treatment is not going to have the effect we're looking for on someone who is this progressed in kidney disease. Or if you don't have enough progression, perhaps this is going to have no response to your current level of kidney disease. So when they're saying, I'm sorry, you don't line up with what we're looking for participation in this study, they're really saying that for this particular treatment, where you are doesn't line up with what this treatment is trying to do. And there should be, to what Patrick was saying, we had a conversation behind the scenes about that word rejection. And the fact that he felt rejected, regardless of the intent of the person he was speaking to, someone who has stepped forward and said, yes, I'm interested, I'm excited at participating in this study, especially for when it's a novel treatment for something that you're currently dealing with, should never be made to feel rejected when they don't line up with the inclusion criteria. And that's where, you know, there's conversations about how are you educating a participant or someone who's coming to participate about why is it that you don't qualify? What language are you using? And then what are you telling them in terms of where can I go next?
That's great. And can you talk a little bit more, just in your own experience and your work, ways that organizations like yourself and other clinical trial sites are working to help better educate different communities about their options when it comes to clinical research?
So when we say education, I kind of want to take a step back because I know that a lot of times when we're talking about clinical trials and education, we're talking about educating the community. And there are a lot of really amazing organizations that are doing work to talk to communities about what is a clinical trial, what does it mean to participate, so on and so forth. But I think from my perspective at least, education is also a word that needs to be used for investigative teams and investigators, as well as sponsors who are approaching them for studies. And I say that because, you know, there can be I'd say a mild naivete and a lack of understanding in what it really means to approach a community and ask them to participate in research, especially communities that are underrepresented in research. And they're underrepresented for a lot of historical reasons that we've probably touched on in a multitude of ways. And I was saying this in another setting, there can also be a paternalistic approach to coming to communities about education. In that, you know, we just need to make sure they know more, we're not sure how much they understand, so on and so forth, and like a teacher training a student. And that's not the approach to a community. It's as a partner, as an informed member. So in acknowledging the fact that, yes, an investigator is fully trained on the science, is, you know, they have their degree, so on and so forth, the alphabet soup that comes after their name, which is necessary and needed, but also fully acknowledging the power and the knowledge and the history that community members have, and approaching them like a partner with humility and like, I don't know what you know. And that makes a difference in communities coming in and saying, I do want to be involved, whether that's actually being in a clinical trial or being involved in the full scope of the research enterprise, like we see with our two other panelists here.
That's great. And Sandy, your perspective as somebody, of course, a part of the community who has an interest in participation, can you share a little bit more about that and what that's looked like for you?
Sure. I have attempted to participate in 3 clinical trials. I have not been accepted as a result of the data that they were looking for. But one of the things that really, well, let me talk a little bit about the reason why I was interested in the first place, because it was personal to me in terms of maybe something that I had experienced or something that a family member was experiencing. And I was really just looking to better understand. There were also a lot of tests that would be done that you don't typically get when you go to your doctor's office every single day. A lot of information that you would receive at a much deeper level than what you would get when you go for your annual physical or you're experiencing a problem. And so those were some of the reasons that drove me to do it. And even though I was not included in those clinical trials, one of the things that I've had an opportunity to do through the patients program is to look at it on the back end through the lens of a researcher that's looking to do it, but also able to lend a voice on the other side of the fence as part of the community. And so what does it take as a community member to maybe gain interest, because we certainly have lost trust in the process due to the atrocities of the past. Those things are real. And sometimes when we talk about the past, we're really talking about today. I mean, if we're real honest. And so how then do we begin to regain the trust of the community? And so I've had an opportunity to sit in some of those panels to actually lend a voice to that. And some of the things that I think many of us probably in this room have heard is we're going to offer you a gift card if you come and you do this, or we're going to offer you, and we're bigger than a gift card. We're much larger than that. And so how then do we gain trust? We need to get into the community before you need me. And so what can you do for me on the other side of the fence before you need me? And so many times they show up and say, hey, we have these gift cards and we have this, whatever it may be, to try to entice you. But it's deeper than that. And so one of the things I've had an opportunity to do is to get involved in that, where we go into communities and we're not going looking for anything. We're not asking for anything, but we're going to see how we can be of assistance to the community. And some of the things that we've been able to do as a result of that through the program is provide transportation services for the community, provide housing information for the community, food deserts. Speak to those types of things before we turn around and say, hey, we need you for some clinical information. And so that's really been a big help in really getting some of the communities in the Baltimore area involved and getting those numbers up in terms of interest in clinical trials.
Thank you. And can you share a little bit more, despite the fact that you hadn't been selected for a clinical trial just yet, you've continued to attempt to participate. Can you talk about why that's important to you?
Sure. It is, has anyone here heard of Henrietta Lacks?
Oh, yes.
So, as I've had an opportunity to be a part of a lot of behind-the-scenes things as it relates to that, and gaining information that's just mind-blowing, how this could happen. And when I really sat down and looked at this, I thought to myself, even with that, if we don't engage as a community, where really are we going? Henrietta Lacks, her cells were really used for almost every medication that we have out here today. Even the polio vaccine, things that we think were maybe long ago, and she didn't have anything to do with that. Tylenol, we're talking about medicines that, everyone knows about, let alone prescription medications. And so as I really started digging into her story, what really spoke to me was we are really, it's a catch-22, if you will, because if we do, then maybe we run the risk of being involved or maybe not fully understanding something. But if we don't, than it will cost us. Because many of us that are sitting in this room, the things that we're talking about impact us largely, much more so than many other communities. And so my thought was, what can I do to not only help myself, but to help my family members? When I look at the cost of some of these diseases as it relates to my family, and the cost has been great. And so my thought is, what can I do to make an impact there and to change that? And one of the keys for me has been to ask questions. And that's one of the things that I think we have been accustomed to, someone spewing information at us, and we've been hesitant to ask those questions. And so on the front end, I'm asking questions. So what are we looking for? What's the intent of this research? And more importantly, what are you looking to accomplish as a result of this research? And not only that, how will I know how it impacts me as a participant as a result of the research?
That's great. Patrick, as both a participant and somebody who works in the community to bring more awareness, can you tell us, what's something you think is really important for people to know before they get involved with the trial or think about getting involved?
One of the things that people should know before they begin with a trial is to do research on the trial. If your trial team does not look like you might be in for a world of hurt. And this is why health equity is so important, and this is why the push for PIs of color is so important. People need to also understand if they meet the criteria to be in the trial, and I use COVID as an example. In the world, because I worked with the World Health Organization at the time, African Americans represented 10% internationally. 10%. Well, hold on, let me change that. People of African descent internationally represented 10% of trialist participants for the COVID vaccine. Why? The risk factors: diabetes, kidney disease, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, cancer, you name it. If you had it, if you was at risk, you could not participate. Do your research. Make sure, just like Sandy said, make sure that you know why you want to do this. It is not just about your health, but it's about the health of your children, maybe your siblings. You need to participate to break down the systemic and institutional biases that are currently out there, because right now you're taking medications that maybe you didn't have a lot of representation with, especially with the vaccine. And of course, you had to deal with the conspiracy theorists and all that other stuff. But research the trial. Understand what's meant in the trial. There are some trials that you may have to go out of town to participate in. You may have to stay on a particular site. There are some trials that are observational. Some trials you can do by doing a survey. Or some trials you can do by just sharing your own personal experience. But make sure that you understand the trial, research the trial, look up the clinical research team, who's sponsoring this, who's organizing this trial, and try to understand what the outcome is going to be. Also, make sure you understand how your data is going to be used. Your data is money. Medical companies make money off of your data because they will sell it to other researchers without your permission. Make sure when you sign the dotted line, you reread it. You take your time. If the trialist team is trying to rush you, get up and walk away. It's not worth it. It's your integrity it's your life, it's your data. And you don't want to end up being the next Henrietta Lacks or being a part of an egregious clinical trial. So those would be some of the things that folks would need to know.
Great point.
And if I could just to double down on some of what they both said, really understand the fact that you are in the driver's seat and it is absolutely your right to ask any and all questions. And if you want a second opinion, you can get a second opinion. But come in, do your research. But when you're actually in the space of, when you're coming in for a clinical trial, the study team will talk to you, they'll talk to you a little bit about the study, but they'll also put in front of you something called an informed consent sheet. It's a requirement for any study that's done to have an informed consent sheet. And that informed consent sheet, as well as the protocol and various aspects of the study, are reviewed by these review boards at any institution that is conducting research. And these review boards are made up of clinicians, they're made up of subject matter experts, and they are held to the standard of making sure that the research being done falls in line with essentially not repeating the past mistakes we've made as it pertains to research and participant rights. So you get to read that informed consent and go through it for as long as you want. And you can ask any questions. If there's a word that you don't understand, or if a timeline or something doesn't make sense, you can ask any questions. And also, you're allowed to take that informed consent sheet with you to consider it even further. So, to Patrick's point, if you're being made to feel rushed in a situation, that might mean that that study team is not necessarily having all the considerations that they should have as it pertains to making sure that you as a participant feel comfortable. But there are now a lot of protections and guidelines in place. And then there's also a lot of, that's why I was speaking to a lot of additional education and training that's done for investigators and their teams on when you're actually having the moment-to-moment communication with a potential participant or someone who's interested in clinical research, how do you guys relate to each other? How do you talk? Because you're up here with the science, but can you speak human to human?
Thank you. Just before we wrap up, I just want to see if there's any questions from the audience.
So the question I have is, when do you get to a point where you decide clinical trials is for me? How do I get to that point? Is it when the doctor is saying, we've done all we can do? Is there something like, is there a process? Help me understand that. And then once you decide or get to that point where you're doing research, where do you go?
Great. Feel free, anyone?
I will share an experience. So when I was diagnosed with diabetic kidney disease, I started working with this organization. And one of the things that I learned was that there was treatment, not only to help me manage my diabetes, but to also lose weight and to help me manage my kidney disease, as well as if I have a risk of cardiovascular disease. So I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure if anybody in here uses this, but is anybody in here familiar with GLP-1s? Yeah, you seen the commercials, Ozempic? We are, okay. I was able to participate in a research when they was doing the study on Ozempic. And when I found out that there was something that could get me off of insulin, I'm taking 2 forms of insulin now. And I've been taking it for like 15 years. Even after I got my transplant, I'm still on insulin. And it wasn't until my transplant nephrologist was like, Patrick, I really want you to skip going to your endocrinologist today. I'm about to tell you about a clinical trial. you're going to end up getting off of insulin. You just need to change your nutritional values, which at the time they put me on a ketogenic diet. So being on that diet, I can't use insulin because I was only allowed to eat 20 grams of carbs a day, which is extremely low. That trial and the outcome led me to participate in a trial that where they came up with SGLT2 inhibitors like Jardiance. So when you think about the use of Jardiance, Jardiance can protect people with heart disease from dying. Did y'all get that? Did y'all hear that? Okay. If you got kidney disease, it protects you from dying. Well, that's all I need to hear. The trial was so good, they stopped it halfway in phase 3 human trials because the success of that. So when you look at Ozempic, now Ozempic is helping people dealing with alcohol addiction, even some people dealing with drug addiction. A lot of these trials, you go in thinking it's one thing, and there's a multiplicity of things that could come out of it. Because of that, my kids are now on either a GLP-1 or an SGLT2 because heart disease runs in my family, and I know I'm at risk. So when you hear about these things, like if you have a particular disease state, you really have to investigate. Now, one place to find trials is clinicaltrials.gov, but there are other websites that it slips my mind right now. You're going to have to do your own research, but I guarantee you, whatever you are dealing with right now, there is a clinical trial for it. Find it, read up on it, study on it, pray on it, consult with some people that may be dealing with the same thing, and if they went through it, then I would encourage you all, sign up and participate, because you can drop out of a clinical trial at any given time, and you can't be penalized.
Yes.
If you're being mistreated or you don't think this is going the way you want it to go, you can, okay, I'm done, and walk away, and you don't lose anything. So I hope that answered your question. But yeah, please investigate clinical trials.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit more. Many people think that their regular family doctor might mention a trial. That's not always the case. You can research for yourself. Any patient advocacy or community organization that you know and trust might have information for you. Organization like ourselves, CISCRIP, and many local hospitals and clinical research sites like where Yejide works.
Yeah, and I was going to add, one website you could go on to right now on your smartphone is Research Match. That website literally exists to match those who are interested in participating in clinical trials with researchers. Because as you've probably heard and seen, these clinical trials are looking for you. They're looking for you as our community you. So if you are interested, you can go and sign up, and that essentially puts you into their view, and you're putting in information about your background, your data, so on and so forth. And they're not necessarily asking for personal health information. But when an investigator now approaches Research Match, and I'm a liaison for Research Match at our institution because investigators use that, they'll have to provide me with an IRB approval. So again, we talked about that earlier. And then they're able to send out communications to you saying, we have this study, you kind of align with what we're looking for, are you interested? And then to what Hope was saying, checking with your local hospitals and healthcare centers, because they're usually involved in some capacity. And then if you're involved in churches in the local area, for example, a lot of our faith-based organizations are partnering with hospitals and researchers, and they may have some of this information for you as well.
If I can add, thank you for saying that. One comes to mind, it's based in DC. It's the National Black Church Initiative. If everybody's familiar with that, just go, I think it's nbci.org. They have a health ministry page. They keep lists of clinical trials, so you can certainly go there.
Perfect.
And then also NIH is also another great resource for clinical trials as well.
Lots of great ones. A round of applause for our speakers today. Thank you so much for your time, for your information. If we could get that last slide up on the screen, we do have a gift card raffle just to thank you for being with us today. So you can scan this QR code to enter our mailing list and enter it into a $100 Visa gift card. We appreciate your time, and we have more resources at our table if you wish to stop by before you head out today. Thank you so much.